For Rob Lyon, Chicago is clearly his kind of town. A native Indianan, went to college at Northwestern and took a Wharton MBA to the First National Bank of Chicago before starting with the Windy City's Institutional Capital Corporation in 1976. After a 7-year experiment with New York, Rob came back to Chicago and Institutional Capital, which he eventually bought. He now runs more than $13 billion, including the high-rated ICAP Equity Fund.
I never saw my dad as a businessman. I always saw him as dad. I always saw him as the guy that walked through the door at 6:30 and dropped his briefcase and got into whatever we were getting into.
It was great just watching him. I learned that in this business, you didn't have to be a Gordon Gekko. He was very successful just being him.
He was always looking back, and I think the farming community in Indiana helped frame who he was, that he never lost sight of his own background in his beginning, to the degree where his accomplishments and his wealth didn't change who he was.
When my dad was 10 or 11, he would go over to his grandfather's house. They would read the Wall Street Journal, and they literally would read through stock quotes. And I think that's where his love for that business came in. My dad got accepted to Northwestern University and studied economics, but really thought that he was going to follow in his grandfather and father's footsteps and go to law school. But he didn't, and he decided to actually kind of pursue his passion for investing.
One of the many remarkable things about you is you run all that money with only about 40 stocks in your portfolio. The average person running that much money is hedging in hundreds. Why do you do it your way?
Well, Lou,
Got more guts?
I think we're confident in our stock picking capabilities, and in a 40 stock portfolio, most of the positions are 2 or 3%.
My dad had the best work ethic of anybody I've ever met in my entire life. He was definitely, very, very respected, but he was so kind and humble that I think that he was truly an accessible boss.
When I first met with Rob, I had this vision that he was unapproachable almost because of the reputation that he had within the industry. He ended up being a very kind, very engaging, compassionate person, and in the interview, he just really wanted to get to know me.
He had so much talent that it just kept coming and coming in different forms, in different ways, but his biggest talent was he never lost himself in what he did.
Rob loved helping people grow their money, and that's because he loved people, not money. I actually met Rob through this young man named Tommy who was selling newspapers on the corner and became Rob's friend. And he eventually ended up hiring Tommy when he got in high school. Rob became an instant friend because he was a fan of helping young people improve their lives. At the time, I was running a little organization in Cabrini Green, and Rob was always pushing me to think about what I could do if. And that if always required money. So he was the one person who kept challenging me to ask him for more money, which was odd because I'm in his office sharing what we're doing. And he was like, Dana, what if you had an X number of dollars? And Rob once said to me, my calling is making money. And you, talking to me as a guy who's running a nonprofit, you can do something with that money with your calling.
Donna and Becky Wagle are two of many who are taking advantage of the open house days in Greencastle, a joint effort to sell 150 homes left vacant by IBM employees after the company shut down its operations here last November.
IBM left Putnam County, where we grew up. It was just becoming a poorer place. And he felt that if there were more educated people, it would really help the whole county prosper economically. We set up this scholarship program with the idea that these scholarships would go to students whose career goals might include coming back to Putnam County and giving back to the county. He wanted to help He wanted to help those kids really badly.
With Mom, she had us busy all the time. If we weren't doing one thing, we were doing something else. If we were in the library club, and we'd have to read like umpteen books every summer. And that was her way of passing on the kind of spirit that she got from her parents to her children. And then we've tried to pass those traits down to her grandchildren, because a lot of what's in every one of us is what we learn from our parents.
Rob felt that the kids were just getting by in school, that they were coasting, as he said. And so on Sundays, he had two things that were important. He had a work crew that would do yard duty, and then we had Dr. Lyon's Learning Academy.
Dr. Lyon's Learning Academy was every weekend we would get together and learn about a new subject. I remember he bought this globe, and he would spin it. We would point our finger to a country, and then we would go right to the World Book encyclopedias, open it up, and really learn a little bit more about that country and the history of that country. That was a really special time.
He was a very, very active reader, and he was always reading these ginormous history books. And I remember when Books on Tape came out, he was so excited because he could read his ginormous books, but then he would be listening to Books on Tape as well. Even on vacation, you'd see him in these like white tube socks with the most ridiculous sneakers and these big black headphones, walking up and down the beach listening to Books on Tape about like Thomas Jefferson or George Washington. It really doesn't get much dorkier than that.
One of the strengths and things that impressed me about Rob early on was his availability. I would get a call back within 24 hours because he cared about what other people was doing. But then I do remember there was a period of time when I called him and he didn't call me back.
He would ask me to go through his computer and print out emails, and he was off somewhere else. I suspected that something was wrong.
I got the call from the doctor telling me that the tests that they did came back that he had leukemia. He was constantly angry because there was so much that he didn't get to do.
It blows my mind that he was able to compartmentalize this crazy illness that he had and work through it and give me 100% while he was going through chemo. So when it came time to go down to school, he got himself together and he moved me into my dorm. There was no elevators. It was in Florida in the dead of summer. And we went to dinner that night, and I just remember how happy he was that he got to see his youngest child go to college. And I'm so glad that I got that memory because it was one of the last ones.
I remember one time I went to go visit him in the hospital, and actually, like right next door to his room was a young boy about 9 years old who also had AML. And all we talked about the whole time that we were visiting was this boy that was next door to him, and he couldn't believe, what this young boy was going through. And so that was, yeah.
Rob had a lot of compassion for those that needed help, for those that didn't have it as well as others. He was very charitable. He was very giving, not only of his money, but also of his time.
I think that there's so much to learn from my dad, and he wanted nothing more than to be a good person and do good things for other people. And I think by supporting the foundation and his legacy, it's inspiring others to live in the same vein.
I think the work that we do with the Lyon Family Foundation is really cemented in humility and compassion. And I think that that's why, we continue to look for causes and areas that we can help, not just as it relates to something that directly affected our family with leukemia, but what's going on in our local community.
If Rob was delivering a message about the foundation, I think it would be about life change. I think it would be about impacting lives that bring transformation to individuals.
It's all that was important to him, was to give, and give where it has some meaning. Don't just give and feel that that's okay. Give and do. And I think that if we all could really remember Rob in the most favorable way, it would be his generosity to others.